When I came to Bethel and found that you went to chapel because you wanted to, there was a freedom about that just really blessed me. These were people who just breathed a sense of openness and understanding and seeking after truth. And so by the time I got into seminary full time, it was a remarkable experience of spiritual and intellectual and personal growth, understanding who God was and what the world was and what the gospel was. Because not only was seminary a life change for me, so was the first pastorate. And that was because the people of the congregation were much more full of grace and love than they were full of rules and regulations. But the agreement of the church bylaws had a lot of rules in them. So when an AA group, a newly formed group, came and said, could we use your church to have our AA meeting? Being with those dear people, recovering alcoholics became some of the dearest people I knew at that time. But then it changed the culture of our church, because the people of the church would begin to say, you know, my father was an alcoholic, or my son is on drugs. And the openness to say, that's part of our family system. So it was no longer a secret. In this teetotaling church where nobody was supposed to drink, see, it was easy to keep secrets, but not anymore.
Pastor Lee came in, I believe, 1966. Within 4 weeks of him becoming a minister and coming to our church, my father passed away, and I was 10. And spent a lot of time with Pastor Lee and Carol. Just earlier this month, he gave the sermon at a funeral for a member of the church. 47 years later, he's still available to us. He still shares in our joys and our grief. And he just does it with compassion and grace and friendship.
I think what we learned at Whittier in a new way, in a full-blown way, is the gospel is good news for everybody, but sometimes we make it really hard for people to hear it and understand it or believe it, because it's so cerebral rather than whole life. It's got to be both. The 15 years that we had at Bethel that ended in 2009 were among the most joy-filled years of life for me. God did amazing things at the seminary, and I am so thankful. The question was, what kind of a seminary prepares people for this kind of world and this kind of ministry? And I still remember waking up early one morning and saying, what if we had a center for biblical and theological foundations? What if we had a center for spiritual and personal formation? And what if we had a center for transformational leadership? So we instituted the notion that we would have required courses in each of the 3 centers. And at that point, there wasn't a single required course for personal formation or spiritual growth. So it changed the culture of the seminary.
He's had a tremendous impact on the seminary, his leadership of it from 1994 until he retired. I think one of the most significant things was his vision for the 3 centers philosophy, and that continues today. We hire on the basis of people's understanding of and commitment to the 3 centers philosophy. And as we look to the changing world that we're dealing with in terms of theological education, Leland really established that as part of the DNA of Bethel Seminary that continues today.
I believe his greatest legacy is really helping shape world changes. He saw us as world changers way before we saw ourselves as world changers. He impacted, lots of us as students during his tenure. It remains as a key component in what we are doing both locally and globally. What we are doing today is totally because of people along the way like him.
Leland has been so impactful in my own ministry because he has been such a champion and such a supporter of women in ministry like me and many others. And he's been such a supporter of people from so many different diverse backgrounds. He really creates space for so many people to step up and to lead. I just love that he approaches hard conversations with compassion, with a space for grace, but he's also a strong leader who's not afraid to say what needs to be said in a situation.
That theme of God's love and God's grace and God's compassion is at the heart of what Christ is about. And it needs to be the heart of what churches are about. I don't know if I can get through saying this. But if I stand before the Lord someday, and I hope I will, I believe I will, I'm hoping there are going to be people from tribes and nations that I don't know about. We're going to say, because you did that, we're here. If that happens, it will be the best legacy I can imagine.